Greetings, dear listeners! You are listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a ridiculously queer podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology. I'm Pastor Emily, and I forgot to answer this question beforehand. I'm Pastor Emily, and I'm the round and rolling droid that somehow magically never gets the sand all gritted and stuck and dysfunctional.
Right.
Or something.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, who we have complicated relationships with, has gone on record. One of the many things he criticized about this movie's scientific accuracy is that BB-8 would not be able to roll on sand. And I'm like, could you not imagine a sci-fi universe where we have hydrophobic spray? Couldn't we have like sandphobic spray or something that would work? I don't know, but whatever.
Just like mini little force field, like Dune does it, right? Where they like right? You can't. Yeah. Also, if you want more on Neil deGrasse Tyson and why we have a complicated relationship with him, feel free to check out Nerds at Church's episode on male astronomers, where we talk about a bunch of male astronomers because we had to put them in somewhere, and basically all of them have controversies. So he is one of them, and we talk about those controversies, and we can link to that in our show notes, as we say on this podcast.
Yep. And you've already been hearing my voice for a while, but I am Pace, and I am the garbage that will do. And you can follow
the garbage one that will do. You're not actual garbage.
Yeah. Follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch. It starts at only $5 to sign up. And there's so much cool stuff on Patreon this month, May, when this is coming out, which is Star Wars month, because May the 4th be with you, and Revenge of the 5th, as people say.
And Revenge of this the month, 6th. There's like so many.
Oh, yeah. Revenge of the 5th and 6th. Lots of Sith revenge. But in May, our movie commentary is Prey, so the best Predator movie, probably.
That is the best
one. Or at least tied with the first one.
So good.
Also, we get Solo, the Star Wars movie, for our $10 tier. And you'll probably be getting Ahsoka Butu because they'll probably be a little late. And maybe the Obi-Wan Butu.
We can do both. I think we can do both because we're doing Ahsoka. Ahsoka is going to be recorded within a week of when we're recording this.
Yes.
Or a week and a half.
It just matters how quickly so it might come out like editing.
Right. Yeah. But I think we can get Obi-Wan recorded after I get back from my travels.
I love that because then we can get like our full circle Leia moment, since we see young Leia in that, and infant Leia in the prequel trilogy. Now we finally we have adult Leia in the original trilogy, and now we have older, wizened queer Leia and queer Leia in this one. Anyway.
It's almost like the Jesus things, where we get like one little story of kid Jesus. One little story of kid Leia. I love it. Also, did you know, I have not looked into it, but apparently there's news out about a Star Wars Episode 10.
It's not, well, from what I heard, maybe you heard differently, but what I heard is it's not Episode 10 because it's not part of the Skywalker trilogy, but it is continuing the story with Rey where this movie left off.
The whatever article or ad I saw that I didn't click on because I don't like clickbaiting and I don't like reinforcing that, had an X. So that's all I know. I don't know anything more about it, but I'm excited for it if it continues Rey's story, especially a Rey story that doesn't involve her making out with her, I don't know, brother-ish character.
Her cousin or something. But I just looked it up because I was curious about this. And so it was a rumor that it would be called Episode 10, A New Beginning, but that has been said to be categorically incorrect by Disney. That it will not be continuing the Skywalker. So that was just a rumor. But it is going to focus on Rey, which is really cool. And her rebuilding the Jedi. The Jedi.
I thought she was now Force. A Skywalker.
Yeah. Yes.
That was the whole third movie. It's her being like Rise of Skywalker. So it's still the Skywalker saga. Loopholes, people.
It could be, depending on how you look on it. If you look at it as the Skywalker saga is dealing with the mistakes of the men of the Skywalker family, then we can have a new saga that is not the Skywalker saga, that is the Rey saga, and deals with how awesome she is. So that's my personal headcanon for it anyway.
Okay.
I don't want it to be episode 10 just because, like, not because of anything about, like, needs to be true to the original intent or anything, but just because I feel like we're getting a little obnoxious with the numbering of things, and it would just be fun to have.
I mean, okay, that's fair. That's fair, and that's valid. But yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
That was a good transition to announcements and check-in, though, right?
Yeah.
Actual relevant. Yeah. Also, my chair is squeaky. I'm sorry.
It's all good. Hopefully, most of that I will remove in editing, but some of it I might not. But whatever. So there's lots of Star Wars movies coming out, though. I'm really excited. And June. So, in a little Star Wars news thing, if you're listening to our podcast on this, you probably heard all this Star Wars news. But and just in case you haven't, in June we get our Star Wars Acolyte series, which will be streaming on Disney Plus, and it's going to be set. What is that? It's set in the High Republic era, in the late High Republic era. So the books that I'm reading and love so much is kind of going to be the first live action movie, or not movie, first live action show set in the High Republic era, and I'm so excited. The only High Republic show we have right now is the Jedi Younglings or Little Jedi or whatever that little kid TV show is with
Tales
the little
of the Jedi?
Padawans. No, Jedi Adventures, Young Jedi Adventures, something like that, with like 3 little Padawans who are being trained by Yoda. That's set in the High Republic stuff, but it's meant for kids and doesn't really get into the themes of the High Republic that this other show will. But we also have a whole bunch of movies coming out, including the Ahsoka movie, which I'm really excited about. We talked about that in our Ahsoka episode. So listen to that, which is on Patreon this month, supposedly.
Last month. This month. Maybe now. Who knows?
Maybe now.
I mean, if nothing else, our Ahsoka arc is out. Because that came out already. Right?
Yeah. Sure.
I thought it was already out, so it was an easy, like...
No.
Yes, no, maybe. Okay, I thought it came out at the end of March.
Our Ahsoka arc has, yes, you're right.
Okay,
but not
that's what I was going for.
I was getting confused.
Yeah,
we have too much going on. It's also a really busy time in both of our lives. For me, it's like the end of the programming year at church, and I also just have a lot of deadlines coming up in the end of the semester, so I'm just swamped right now.
Yeah.
But I'll survive. That's how I'm doing.
Wrecked my back. I wrecked my back, so I've been doing a lot of not moving and just like reading and watching things.
Nice.
I officially have started 3-Body Problem. I also was like, I can't watch more than 2 episodes in a row. Otherwise, I will not be able to sleep because my brain will be like... So, it's a slow process.
Yeah.
Continuing to truck on with the Doctor Who series. I've now started the Sarah Jane Adventures, which are so cute. I love them. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I love Luke as her her son, and I love that K9 appears briefly, but on occasion.
Yeah.
I just love the whole cast. It's fun.
Agreed. And
Yeah, my
I
doctor.
finished
Oh, go ahead.
I finished the third book in the Graceling Realm novels. There of 5, the original trilogy. I finished
Ooh,
this morning,
that's
so now I'm on to the newer books. I
that's
will
a
be reading
bookmark I
them.
recognize.
Yeah, this is the only bookmark I have ever kept. It's a little bit too long for, like, it's a little bit longer than the most of the books, which I think was on purpose, but then ends up that this like sticks out a little. So the HNAC might become NNAC. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's better than like cutting off Grogu's belly
Yeah,
and
yeah.
R2D2.
Yes.
Yeah, I love my. It's the only bookmark that I've like actually been able to sustainably like use from book to book. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I was going to laminate it, but then I didn't have time. So now I know for the future, or to either make it shorter or laminate it, or both.
Mm. Yeah. What about you?
Controversial
What are you?
question, though.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Let me answer that, and then we'll get to the controversial question. So I've been reading. I'm trying to. So last year, I read through most of the Star Wars novels that are canon up until the end of Return of the Jedi. And I purposefully was waiting to get into the Star Wars novels set um in the intertestamental period, I guess I'll call it, between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, and also in Force Awakens and beyond. That's a church nerd joke
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mm-hmm.
aren't super church nerdy. But so I just started trying to get into some of those as we're watching these movies. Because I don't like I can talk about this a little bit more as we go through, but I don't like watching the sequel trilogy as much as I like watching the prequel and regular trilogy, because I get so fucking mad with where the sequel trilogy goes by the end that it's hard
Yeah,
for
the last
me.
movie of the sequel trilogy
Yeah,
is
so
the
it's hard for me
worst.
to watch them because I 7's pretty good, 8 is amazing, and then I get to 9 and it's like it ends on
The
such a downer
worst.
for me that
Well, and
like
it's
I
just
just
like
don't like
so
watching
much
them.
bad about the ninth one. Yeah,
Right?
and
And
I
so
think I
like
judge the ninth one more than I judge the prequels or the originals because my expectations were built up so much because the seventh and eighth were
oh,
so good.
I knew it was going to be trash as soon as I heard well, we'll get there. We have a whole 2 movies to cover
We'll have
before
a
we get to
whole
them.
episode on
But
that one.
yep. But anyway, so just in case you're wondering what Emily and my stance is on Rise of Skywalker. But anyway, so I don't watch these as much, and so that's one of the reasons I was waiting to read it until we were watching it for the podcast, because I knew that would be one of the few times I actually sit down to watch them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm almost finished. Excuse me. I'm almost finished reading The Force Awakens. I didn't quite finish it in time for this, but but after that, there's like a Poe Dameron book I want to read. There's 2 sets of trilogies that are set in between about like the final battles of the Empire and the rise of the New Republic. There's 2 Leia novels, Rise of the Resistance, and also The Princess and the Scoundrel, that are set in between. Princess and Scoundrel, obviously about her and Han's relationship. And so I'm just really excited to get into all those books, which I haven't yet, but you'll probably be hearing more about those as we go through, and also as in our Star Wars literature retrospective. And as for what I've been watching, not much except for Doctor Who. I finally have new glasses, so I've been able to resume my Doctor Who watching. It was kind of
I know
tough when
I
I
was
couldn't see
catching
for
up
a
to
while.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
I was starting to catch up. I'm still, 60 behind, but
Yeah. So I am starting uh season 8 of Classic Who, which is the second season of the Third Doctor, and I'm about halfway through season 5 of the Revive series, which is the first season of the 11th Doctor. And I have 2 more seasons left of Sarah Jane Adventures and 1 more season left of Torchwood. So that's where I am at, if you are all keeping track at home.
nice. I'm about to do the Spike crossover episodes. I already watched the first Spike crossover episode of Torchwood, but friend of the podcast, Susanna Porter, and was like excited about watching the Spike episodes. And so there's 3 Spike episodes. So the next one is the second one. And so we're going to rewatch / I'm going to rewatch and she's going to watch the first one, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And then we're going to watch the next 2. Because I don't think anything happens in between that is relevant that you need to know. So.
I mean, one of the characters dies, so you kind of need to know that he dies and is still kind of alive.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I can tell her that.
Yeah. And if you're not like a Buffy fan and don't know what we're talking about, but you are a Doctor Who fan, James Marsters is who we're talking about because he plays Spike in Buffy, and he plays Jack's kind of boyfriend from / childhood friend / something.
Captain John Hart.
From
Yeah.
Torchwood. So anyway, that said though, I have on my list some horror movies that I plan to watch. So maybe by the time we record Aliens versus Predator Requiem, I will have some horror movies to report back to. But on Stars, they just released Dear David, which I wanted to watch for a long time, which is based off of Adam Ellis's ghost story. So I'm really excited for that and a few other things. So stay tuned, especially if you're here for horror stuff and are like, there's not much horror in this season. I mean, aliens are kind of horror, but...
The aliens are horror, and we talked in our last episode about the horror, especially for Revenge of the Sith. Like, that movie is a horror movie.
Yeah. And we're going to get into some of the horror here, too, because the First Order is pretty horrific as well. But like, we get it, too. Like, in full fairness to the true blue horror buffs out there, Star Wars is generally considered a sci-fi fantasy, not a horror franchise. So half of our season is sci-fi fantasy. And I understand, and some of you are missing that we used to do more horror, so we'll get back to it. But it's also fun getting back to it.
If you want us to do more horror, tell us which franchise exists.
Well, there really aren't
horror
any.
Franchise.
If you want to create a witch franchise for us to cover, but you can at least name the witch movies you want us to cover, especially the scary ones.
If you send us an email, we'll read it, because I promised, because I said some incorrect things in our first episode, I promised to check the Horror Nerds at Church email every time we record and field all of the horror-ish stuff. So so far we have not gotten any angry letters, but we welcome them. Pace writes angry letters to Nerds at Church basically once a year, and it's great. We love a good angry letter. Angry can be in quotations.
It's fair. It's fair.
What was you were gonna say or ask something controversial?
Oh yeah, a controversial question, which was brought upon by your bookmark. Because on your bookmark I drew R2D2, which is one of Emily's favorite droids, and they're showing it to the camera so everyone can see on our audio podcast. But but I love it. So my controversial question though is, since I also know you love BB-8, which droid is your favorite, BB-8 or R2?
First off, false binary.
Or Chopper.
Choose too. Queer love, relationship anarchy determines that, in fact, love is different for each of them.
Yeah, of course.
R2D2 and I have old relationship energy that's staying and consistent and reliable, and BB-8 and I have new relationship energy that's like super energized and all over the place and rolling around.
And does Chopper fit in there too? I feel like you just have a thing for. I feel like you have a thing for all the, what's the good word for them? The very uppity droids or something.
I mean, Are
Yes,
they the uppity
astromechs.
droids? Because C-3PO feels like the uppity droid.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I do not have
The
a thing
chaotic.
for C-3PO.
I would say
chaotic,
the ones
like,
that would fit on the chaotic side of the alignment chart.
Oh, for sure. We should make. Now I want to do a like D&D alignment with the droids.
Please do it. Please do it. If you list it out, I'll make Canva to make it pretty, but I empower you to make it, and then I'll prettify it.
Okay.
So, while Emily is writing that down, I think that's it for announcements. We don't have much announcements or anything because we are nearing the end of the season. We're going to take a break. You already know our next season is going to be which season. If you want to listen to Nerds at Church while we're on break, though, they're going to be having a season on superheroes, which is kind of related to some of what we'll talk about later. So
yeah, we're super excited for the superhero season, and and it's one that, like, if you're a church person or like a faith formation person, like the way we've organized it, I think would make for a really good like series because they all pair like historical / real life heroes, pop culture heroes, and a biblical hero, and so we talk about all of their stories together. So if you need just like some sort of like youth group something,
or if you want to do like a full-on lesson plan around heroes of the faith, which are some biblical and some historical, hit me up for my lesson, Clouds of Witnesses, and I'll be happy to send it over too. And you can tie it in with the podcast. Well, we are covering then today Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens, directed by J.J. Abrams. Came out in 2015, which is already, this movie's already almost 10 years old. Next year will be 10 years old.
Oh. Weird. Now we're getting into the one where like I moved so much that I have to know like when in that year it came out to like know.
It came out December of that year. December 2015.
Okay.
Where when Disney took over Star Wars, they changed the release dates from May to December to usually November or December around there. So, but before that, they were traditionally released in May, which is why I forgot about that. So you used to talk about like how Star Wars for you always had like a Christmas connotation. And I was like, why? And then I was like, oh yeah, because Disney changed it. But I always was like, oh, they're a May movie. They're a summer blockbuster movie. Yeah. So it's just funny. Different connotations.
Solo came out, I think, in May. I think Solo was a May one too. But yeah.
So, Star Wars is one of the movies that started Star Wars The Force Awakens is one of the movies that is cited in starting the requel trend. REQUEL. If you're a horror person, you would know what that is if you've watched Scream 6, which is just called Scream because they talk all about requels there. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this movie and Jurassic World, which is another requel, both came out in the same year. Also, we had Avengers Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Inside Out, Furious 7, as in Fast and Furious franchise, Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, James Bond Spectre, Jupiter Ascending, 50 Shades of Grey, Kingsman, Ex Machina, 1915, Pixar's The Good Dinosaur, and The Hateful Eight were all some of the big movies of that year.
I think I've only seen like 4 of those, maybe 5.
I've seen too many of those, is what I'll say.
I don't know which Avengers movie is which. So like I think I've seen the Avengers one and Ant-Man, Inside Out, Hunger Games, Jupiter Ascending. I don't actually know if I've seen The Good Dinosaur. I don't think I have.
Oh, that's a really cute one. It's not one of the Pixar's like best, but it's still really good and solid.
Yeah. So that's 5.
I'm surprised you haven't
I would
seen
like to see
50.
it.
No, I'm not surprised you haven't seen 50 Shades of Grey. I watch 50 Shades of Grey because I'm the type of person that needs to watch this and be like, holy shit, what the hell are they doing? So that's why I watch 50 Shades of Grey.
That's real.
Speaking of, if you ever want us to cover the horror trilogy 50 Shades of Grey on the podcast, let us know. We will. We absolutely will. If you want to hear a pastor talk about 50 Shades of Grey, especially.
Yeah.
I just finished
watching ContraPoints, like 3-hour like YouTube on Twilight, and she gets into 50 Shades of Grey some. So
yeah. Because 50 Shades of Grey, if you don't know, listener, what started out as a Twilight fanfic before it was turned into a standalone novel. In the horror world, though, we had It Follows, which is still many people's favorite, one of many people's favorite horror movies. Mad Max Fury Road,
which
Poltergeist
is amazing.
remake, right? The Poltergeist remake, which surprisingly I haven't seen. Insidious 3, Terminator Genesis, Hotel Transylvania 2. We covered the first one with Justin Thornburg in season 3.
I have seen
The Martian.
the second one. I love The
Martian, which is directed by Ridley Scott.
Nerds at Church.
So Ridley Scott also directed Alien and Alien Prometheus and Alien Covenant and stuff. So that's why I'm mentioning here. Crimson Peak, Goosebumps, and Paranormal Activity, Ghost Dimension. It was kind of a relatively, compared to many other years, quiet year for horror. So, but those were the big ones.
So I've only watched 3. I was thinking that it would be more balanced, but that was the year that I ended my first call and moved to rural Minnesota. So I was like 45 minutes away from the theater. So that is part of the not watching as many movies, I think.
This was also, speaking of that, this was also a year of many movies for me, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when was the first time you've seen this film?
In theaters. I think it was actually, because I was in Minnesota, I spent holidays in Iowa with my best friend and friend of the podcast, Stephanie Kaler, and her family. And so I think she and I went together to see The Force Awakens. I'm pretty sure. What about you?
This was also a year of many big life transitions for Pace, including a move from, I was living in Frederick, Maryland, and I moved to Berkeley, California. I also got married in 2015 to Matt May. And so I saw this movie in theaters with Matt May, and I'm going to call this period of Star Wars movies the Matt May period of Star Wars movies. This is not Therapy Nerds at Church, however, it might as well be for this series. Because I can't separate out it was a thing that my ex and I used to do, is always try to hit the Star Wars movies in theaters together. And we had like our own special traditions around it and stuff. But we saw this movie as a double feature, which is something I love to do. If you ever have like a day off with nothing else you want to do, a little more complicated now because of COVID, but like what I used to do is working in church. My ex and I both worked in church, so we usually have Fridays off. So we would just go on an opening day during the day when the theaters were almost empty, because everybody wants to go to the afternoon or evening showings. So you just watch 2 movies back to back at the theaters, grab a lunch in between it. It's really fun. So, and you get a pair of the movies together. So I watched this Force Awakens paired with the Peanut movie, which was really cute. The Charlie Brown Peanut movie, the computer animated one that also came out in 2015. So
nice.
That was my first memory of seeing that, and I enjoyed it. So
yeah.
Well, nice. I guess we can get into some background. What do you have? Just because I like to ask and put you on the spot every time. By now you should know what's coming, though.
The cishet white nerdy boys don't understand that they're still in the movie. They're just not the heroes.
Yeah. I mean, there are a
And
few of
they
the
get why
heroes
not.
are cishet, but not many.
We don't know that they're het.
Han Solo's a hero.
Because Poe. Okay, Han
Well,
Solo.
Poe's not white though. Poe's not white. He's
Hmm.
Latinx.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, played
Yeah.
by Oscar Isaac, famous actor.
Yeah, but they're not like they're. I mean, Han is only kind of the hero, right? Like he dies.
Yeah.
Most of the cishet white boys are Kylo Ren
Yes.
and Snoke. Like,
Yes.
but they get mad because they're not the heroes because they were too busy on January 6th to be heroes.
Oh, there you go. Whoop.
It's like timey-wimey, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yes. So, oh, that reminds me of something else I want to put down in our deep dive about racism.
Dun, dun, dun.
Maz Katana? Is that her name? Maz Katana? Anyway, going back up. So, getting to the behind the scenes of this movie, where we left off with was George Lucas had just finished the prequel trilogy. It received major backlash. People hated it. He was feeling burnt out. So he canceled plans for a sequel trilogy. Everybody was really sad about that. But I mean, if you remember, he had also previously canceled the prequel trilogy plans in the mid 80s after he was burnt out over the original trilogy. So it's also kind of on brand for him. So, because when you put out like a major multiple year work, it's oftentimes you're like, I'm done. I don't want to ever do it again. I get that. I get that vibe. So, but Lucas wanted to retire as well, and he was still the head of Lucasfilm, which is his studio. So he began talking with Bob Iger, who was then head of Disney, about signing the company over. Disney acquired Lucasfilm for a record-breaking $5 billion. $4 billion of that was liquid assets. The other billion was stocks. A wild, unthinkable amount of money. But anyway, Walt Disney acquired Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy, who's a co-founder of Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg's production company, and produced many films such as E.T., Jurassic Park, all sorts of stuff. And at the time, she was also the co-chairwoman of Lucasfilm. Was brought on to be the new head of Lucasfilm, which she still is to this day. A lot of the cishet white boy, not real fans, but wannabe fans who say that they blame Kathleen Kennedy for ruining the franchise. So she gets a lot of hate, which is totally undeserved. Because Star Wars is doing better than ever, I think, with the amount of TV shows, movies, and stuff going out.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, George Lucas, or even though he retired, he was still a creative consultant in the early stages of production. Like it's pretty. As soon as Lucasfilm was bought by Disney, like it was basically common knowledge that they're going to start working on a sequel trilogy. And so Lucasfilm was a creative consultant before he fully retired. And his ideas, though, for the sequel are just wild. Like, some are good, some are bad, but they are almost all bizarre. And so when people complain about, like, oh, I wish they would have made Lucas's version, I'm like, no. So some of the cool stuff is, like, it would have shown Princess Leia become rebuild, like it would have focused on her more, which is cool. I like that. But she would have become Supreme Chancellor and rebuilt the new Republic, and I'm like, that doesn't seem on brand for her. And then there's also stuff like how George Lucas wanted to double down on the midichlorian things. They want to like show how midichlorians were like part of like this microbiotic world or something. So there's weird stuff like that. Darth Maul was going to be the main villain, which is kind of cool but kind of weird.
Didn't he die multiple times already?
Yes, but this is before. But remember, this is before Disney took over, so Rebels had not been created yet, where he dies for the final time. So he dies for a final time in Star Wars Rebels, which this is before that was made. And he had already been revived in Clone Wars, so he was still supposedly alive. during these early stages. But like some of these ideas are just really weird. I'm not a huge fan of them. So I'm kind of happy that, like, I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's been a while since I've talked about it. One of my favorite podcasts after Nerds at Church, of course, and Horror Nerds at Church, of course, is called I no I Was There Too, is the old podcast. It's called With Gorley and Rust. And one of the people, Matt Gorley, who's one of the co-hosts of it, says that his idea of heaven is you get to go to heaven and you get to see all the versions of movies that might have been made but didn't get made, like original actors that were later recast in real life, the original director that was later, stuff like that. So in that kind of version of heaven, I would be interested in seeing what George Lucas's version of the sequel trilogy would have been. But I'm also glad for this reality that he gave up creative reins.
Succeed.
Yeah, and it also sounds like it was kind of like he was a little disgruntled as he left, like, because it started to become clear that Disney wanted to go in a different direction, and so I feel like he was a little frustrated that they weren't listening to his ideas. But like,
you sold the company, babe.
Right?
What do you
sold
expect?
it. You sold it, and your ideas are weird, so it's okay. And also, we all know how much fans love the prequel trilogy, which is not at all. And that was all you, George. So, so this movie then was put into production in 2012. So, pretty much right after Disney bought Lucasfilm, they fast tracked this into production. J.J. Abrams signed on to direct it in 2013. If you don't know who he is, he's most famous for like the TV show Lost and shows like that. The movie, he directed the Star Trek movie, the 2009 one, stuff like that. So he was brought on. Michael Arndt, who was the Hunger Games trilogy, or I guess quadrilogy, the screenwriter for those movies, and Lawrence Kasdan, who previously wrote Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi with George Lucas. The three of them collaborated to create the script with heavy involvement from Lucasfilm to ensure that was stayed in continuity with the originals. This movie had a budget of $447 million, which is the most expensive film to date, even adjusted for inflation. So this still has the record for the most expensive movie made of all time. There's major, I say in air quotes or scare quotes, major fan backlash that would get worse as the movies continue, but we don't care about them. Fuck them. They were busy on January 6th, as Emily said. So that's what was going on there. That's our feelings on that. Like, I get, like, not liking this movie or not liking the direction it goes and stuff like that, but to just full out hate it because it's diverse and centers people that are not you is really, really shitty, and don't do that.
Just like broadcast how much you are the problem,
right?
That we're trying to address with, yeah.
Because like I have my problems with this movie too, but that's because of it being a requel, and which we'll talk about. But like, I still like the movie; it's still fun, and it did not ruin Star Wars. It's still a fun movie. So anyway, the novelization of this movie was by Alan Dean Foster, who also ghost wrote the New Hope novelization back in the 70s. So I tried to read it. I didn't quite finish, but I read most of it, so I can fill in some of the probably the two weirdest kind of plot holes that the movie has that the book helps kind of figure out what happened in there. So I'll kind of talk about that. And then the last thing is the marketing for this movie was the worst. So if you if you rewind back to 2015, before, when the trailers first came out for this movie, when the toys were first coming out for this movie, when the poster came out for this movie, all the toys had Finn with a lightsaber. All the posters had Finn featured prominently with a lightsaber because they want to make it a twist that Rey would be the person with the Force. But that meant that there were no toys of Rey with a lightsaber. That meant that this surprise kept basically Rey from being seen as the hero of the film till after the movie came out, and then they released like a second wave of toys months later, where little kids of any gender could finally have Rey with a lightsaber to have their first Jedi toy with a lightsaber. And so it just I hated it. Like, I get that they want to keep it a surprise, but it just comes across as sexist to me. So
that's because it is.
Well, yes.
Like, it's, I don't care what reasoning you're now like retroactively giving for why you didn't do it. You didn't do this with any of the other ones, and it's just sexist, and it sets the movie up for failure because you are setting fans up with inaccurate expectations.
Yeah. So, okay. Do you have a 1-sentence summary?
BB-8, Rey, and R2-D2 save the day and keep the story going.
And mine is space is rebooted and awakened.
Nice.
Take your shots, friends.
Space's quote unquote summary.
It is a summary because it is basically. So this is where we get into requel. I just want to quick define what requel is. Requel is something in Scream. The term requel. Let me just pull up the definition because it has. So, a requel. The word requel comes from the movie Scream from 2022, and it means that instead of it being a sequel, and instead of it being a remake, it tries to be both. And so basically, we get the exact same fucking plot of A New Hope, but we just have new characters. And so it's a sequel that connects it to it, but it's remaking the original movie, but just with the whole new cast of characters and keeping the legacy characters there as kind of like.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like. So that's the reason I personally am so annoyed by this movie, is because it's like, it's a remake. It's the same movie as the original, just new characters. Like, it's cool and I love it and it's fun, but like, could we not have come up with something more original than there's a planet/star destroying base that they have to destroy, and it destroys the home of the peace-loving people, and it's by the Empire, and then they have to go and save it before it takes out the rebellion, who's now called
and then we have to find the old hidden Jedi master.
Yeah, the old white guy who's our only hope, only for that to be reversed in the second movie. So, yeah. I feel like we could have come up with something a little bit more original there.
But we really could. I mean, admittedly, also, I think that this is a better story than New Hope, right? Like, I think they did it better and more faithfully to what Star Wars at least has become, right? They actually use lightsabers multiple times.
Yeah.
Lightsabers, in fact, are part of what saves the day.
Yeah, I think part of it is just like, this is what Star Wars New Hope could have looked like if it had the budget and special effects capabilities of, and also the awareness of diversity, and a diverse creative team that the originals did not have. So,
yeah.
Agreed. But also, my friend Rich, who was on a podcast for our Sixth Sense episode, so you can go back and listen to that. He and I have talked many times about Star Wars, and one of the things that he personally, while he loves the sequel trilogy and he loves characters Rey and Finn and all that stuff, one of the things that personally is kind of a bummer for him is that it means that the happy ending of Return of the Jedi is ultimately fails, because the New Republic collapses. All the original characters die throughout this. No one gets a happy ending, and so it just kind of makes the original trilogy kind of a bummer, which I get.
It's true. And also, that feels like life right now. So
Right,
I'm like,
right.
yeah, right. Like we're recording
So
this
is
2 days after the 25th anniversary of the shooting at Columbine. And as someone who grew up in Colorado at that time, like that, and then everything that has happened since in terms of gun violence and school violence and all of those things, I'm just like, there is no happy ending. There's never a happy ending. There's never a hope.
and that gets into like what the point of a space opera fantasy like Star Wars is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be escapism, or is it supposed to be kind of true to the reality of life, which there are no happy endings? And honestly,
Yeah.
both can be. You can make space operas in all the sorts of ways, but this definitely veers the course from it being an escapist film into, oh no, this is kind of more realistic in the way that cycles of the way that history cycles in between progress and then collapse, or evil and good, or however you want to look at it.
Yeah. And I think that's like a while ago, the way that Star Wars was kind of described to me is that the different trilogies are actually like speaking to what was going on in their time. Right. And so when we think about the First Order, I mean, like that came out while Donald Trump was running for
Yeah,
office the first time, and the rise of more open white supremacy.
yeah, and
Like it
yeah,
fits with its context.
right. Whereas, like, yeah, and where was I gonna go with that? Oh yeah, the rise of white supremacy, but also the rise of religious nationalism that is coming out, where the first order is somehow a parapolitical but also religious order that follows in the
Yeah.
footsteps of the empire. So it definitely feels like very much like
Christian nationalism.
far right Christian nationalism. So
Yep.
uh
Yeah.
responding to that.
Yeah.
So yeah. uh One thing I want to quick say about the book before too is that in the book versus the movie, the book starts out with princess, or not princess, I don't want to call her princess because in the book she gets mad when people call her princess. They don't say that in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
With General Leia. General
Mm-hmm.
Leia is the very first character in the book, and we get to hear her thoughts about how she is um, sending Poe out to the mission where she wants to go herself because she wants to try to find her brother, and all the fears about her. We don't, because the book's trying to keep it secret, the twists about Ben Solo being her son like doesn't quite reveal that, but like it just gets into some of the heartbreak she's had in the years and how she's really hoping to find her brother and stuff. So I love that the book starts
Yeah.
off with her.
That's awesome. I like that too. I just love Leia. She's great.
Right.
Stellar. Yeah. Yep, yep. Also, BB-8 is just adorable. I love BB-8. So much energy. Little balls of energy.
Love it.
Ball.
Love it.
Um Also, I there is something about like that moment when Rey is like has eaten her like half portion dinner thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then has the helmet, the fighter helmet, and just like pops the helmet on for funsies after dinner, and just like this space of, in the midst of a day-to-day yearning for people to return and stuck in this space that she's in, there's also this clear call towards something else.
Yeah.
And even if it's just like in the realm of imaginary make believe right now. I love that one. I was like, so cute. Drops the
Yep.
helmet on.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, I give Finn a lot of crap. Because the like, why are you holding my hand? The like trying to save Rey when Rey has it all under control and like she's got
Yep.
it covered. I'm just like, ugh, you're such an annoying man. And also, it's really refreshing to have a black man be the goofy one. And I don't
Yeah,
think we
I
get
love
that
it.
a lot in, I mean, we're starting to get it more, right? But like historically, we have not given roles with, we have like pigeonholed Black people
Mm-hmm.
especially into particular roles. And as I'm watching like the classic Doctor Who, where like the Black guys show up for one story and are dead by the end, right? To then
Yep.
have Finn be goofy and yeah, annoying, but also like he has a character arc. He
Mm-hmm.
grows. It's not quite fixing the like Han shot first. Like it's not quite the fixing the retcon of Han shot first, but like he has his character arc of being in the Empire and being a soldier,
Yeah.
stormtrooper, into freeing himself and like very self-motivated self-preservation into actually wanting to do something for somebody else. Like there's
Yeah.
clear development and growth, which I really appreciate.
And even though from the beginning, though, I just love, like, I understand 100% giving Finn crap for some of the stuff, because I mean, he deserves it. But at the same time, though, like, from the beginning, he's a stand-up dude. He did not join the First Order by choice. He was stolen from his parents as a child, brought up into this. The
Mm-hmm.
first time he's brought out, he refuses to kill innocent people, goes against direct orders, knowing that it will risk his life. He frees Poe, risking his own life. Like, from the very beginning, he is going above and beyond to escape this organization the first chance he gets, which I just think is really cool. And so, like, he's already a pretty stand-up dude, even if his motivations are a little bit more out of self-preservation, and then
Mm-hmm.
becomes even more of one throughout, which I just love.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Also, I love BB-8's like lighter thumbs up. Just like,
Right.
I
So
got
cute.
you. Um, yeah. I also think it's the like, wait, Han Solo, the smuggler, the rebellion general, and they both have like seemingly completely opposite like perspectives on Han, and then they're both right, right? That like,
Yeah, yeah.
I think Harrison Ford did a good job of how he played Han, in this
Agreed.
movie, and that like both in terms of like the acknowledgement of a relationship that was fractured, and that whether or not they got like married or not, and then divorced or not, like that their relationship broke and changed,
Yeah.
and that they can still see each other and recognize the bond that they still have even within that.
Yes.
And also the like Han telling big deal Finn that he
Right.
has a bigger problem, that women always figure out the truth. Like, yes, please
And
keep telling him
the
that. Yeah.
book thankfully does provide some clarity on there, and also there's a whole bunch of like in between books, intertestamental books, that show
Mm-hmm.
their relationship too. But they are actually married, and they still are married in this film. They just haven't seen each other in 5 years, because they kind of went their separate ways after after Ben went to the
Ben.
dark side.
Mm.
Which is real. Like, if you
That
in
that
real
happens a
family
lot.
systems,
Yeah.
it happens a lot. If there's a major family tragedy, if a child is killed or a child goes to jail, or any sort of things that can cause uh, that kind of turmoil and breaking up with the family and stuff. So,
Yeah.
kind of with the requel thing, Hosnian Prime is the new Alderaan who gets destroyed. Originally, a little bit behind the scenes here, is Coruscant was originally going to be destroyed. The New Republic was going to be on
That's what I
Coruscant because that was
thought.
the seat of the Galactic Republic. But Lucasfilm was like, no, you cannot destroy Coruscant. It's such a important planet for like a lot of what they were hoping for in the franchise. So that's why they switched the New Republic to being based on Hosnian Prime. That's in the background. But
Hmm.
so when Hosnian Prime is destroyed, the question, the weird thing is that on this planet, supposedly light years away across the galaxy, where Maz Kanata's Katina is on,
Also, I
they can
love
see it get
Maz. A
destroyed.
couple of my notes got disappeared because I messed up copy paste, but
Oh,
I love Maz. I'm just saying
yeah.
that.
Um,
Continue.
and
the destruction of
but so it's like, how can you see this destruction of this planet from light years away and stuff like that in real time? That's not possible because we know light takes however many. Light travels distance of a year, so if it's many light years away, like 100 light years away, it would take 100 years for light to reach. And the reason the book gives us is this weird thing called, it's a hyperspace phantom space weapon. So this weird magic of that allows the destruction to be seen in real time because the destruction is happening through phantom space, which happens instantaneously throughout the galaxy. So whatever that means.
Weird.
Some weird
but
science.
Also,
yes.
like, once they do the part where they can travel faster than light speed, it's like, that's how everything happens. They traveled at faster than light speed, then they can
at least they have like
faster than light
kind of scientific, they at least try to ground that in some real science, like traveling faster through life is traveling through hyperspace, which is a different, they basically shift into a different dimension, which allows them faster travel. That's also how they can communicate, because they have telecom beacons that communicate through on hyperspace networks and stuff and communicate in real time. But the phantom space, for me, is just that willing suspension of disbelief, a little bit too far of like, okay, now this isn't even grounded in a real scientific idea, and now we're just somewhere else. But that's just me.
Okay. So here's the other piece of this, and we talked about this actually. Kay and I talked about this on Nerds at Church with Jeremy Cobb who is a friend of this podcast as well. When he was on to talk about space travel in pop culture, in our last season, this past season, and part of what we talked about is like because we also talked about it with Katie Mack in our astrophysics section, but part of what we talked about is that there are different ways to portray space travel. And for some movies like Interstellar, the science really matters. Like, that's a big part of the plot. Same with Martian, right? And with other shows like Doctor Who and Star Wars, the science is not the thing that matters. And so when you get too bogged down into the details of science, it actually can detract from the plot and from the stories that you're trying to tell. And so that's part of my like Star Wars thing, is like, once you get that there is hyperspace travel, then all of the other things can be hyperspace too. And then it's like, yeah, you could pretend to make up your science stuff, but like, doesn't matter because it's not based on the like real actual scientific stuff, the way that like Interstellar, they had like scientists who were consultants, and they tried to do as much as they could from like the science that we know, and then jumping off into the unknown. And
Star Trek, for instance, is one of those that tends to be to at least walk the line between science and science fiction, more on the trying to at least ground it in science, even if some of it is very futuristic and stuff. Whereas Star Wars, like I said, is a space opera. It's not meant to. Like, another thing is like the way all of the spaceships move in space, they move like they're moving through the atmosphere in Star Wars. They're not moving like they are moving in some place that has no atmosphere and no gravity, but they're like maneuvering and swinging back and forth and stuff like that. And that's not how stuff works in space. So yeah, all of that. And that's also why it's a little pedantic when people like Neil deGrasse Tyson criticize it for its scientific inaccuracy when it's not meant to be scientifically accurate. But for me, I guess the rule breaking is like it's breaking its own rules then of space. And that's where it gets into a thing for me with the weird weapon. But
which is part of like when you're doing this stuff, if you're not, I was reading at the end of Fire, the second book in the Graceling Realm series, Kristen Kishore talks about like world building and creating. Like, there's a little Q&A in the back, and she talks about like, okay, you go from like when you're doing nonfiction or like based in this world, you have these rules that you have to follow. When you're doing fiction and fantasy and stuff, like, you get to make your own rules, which is awesome until you have to follow your own rules. And so she talks about like the timeline and how like geography had to be constructed, and then later on it was like, oh, but now this has to be this way. And so it's that sort of a thing where like you make your own rules, Star Wars. You literally created your own rules for this whole universe.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an expectation like that you follow those rules. So if you don't want to worry about breaking the rules, don't make those rules, right? Like you didn't have to tell all the details of the science of how this works. You could just say that it works and then let it be. But no, you had to get specific on like how exactly it works, and now you're accountable to what you have said.
And also because you mentioned Maz Kanata, I want to bring her up because I love her character too. She's so fun, and she's one of those. There are a few characters introduced in this movie where they are clear that they have long histories with the characters, but this is our first time meeting them, so we don't know much about them, and it's kind of a mystery about how they are connected with the characters. I love her character. The one criticism I have with her character is that this is the first, she's played by Lupita Nyong'o, and this is the first Black woman to have a speaking role in a Star Wars movie, and she's completely computer generated. And we do not get the first Black woman that actually appears as a Black woman in the movie until we get to Solo. That's the first movie that has a Black woman with a speaking role, and she dies early in that movie too. So it's like Star Wars is still not great with I'm glad that Finn is a Black man and they're giving him ways that break stereotypes and stuff, but they're still treating Black women like shit in the Star Wars universe.
I never know the actors' names for anything, basically, right? But I saw that Lupita Nyong'o was in this, and I was like trying to figure out who she was and like having so much trouble. And so I ended up that like either she's the like captain that tells Finn to go get reprogrammed. Like that was, I was like, maybe that's who she is. Yeah. Why? Like she does it great. It's great, and it's really like well voiced and all of that stuff, and I love how she plays Maz, but like
yeah.
And like, so Black women exist in the Star Wars universe, but they almost are always Black women actors playing an alien behind heavy face makeup. And we very, very rarely see a Black woman actually as a Black woman in the Star Wars universe.
Which is a whole thing, right? Yep. Like where we can have Black women, but just not if they look Black. Not if we know that they're Black women. Yeah.
Right.
What is the deal with Snoke? Who is he? How is he? What is he?
Exactly. No one knows. That's the answer. No one knows.
I don't get it.
But that's also kind of like the Emperor in the original trilogy too. Like we hear all these references to the Emperor, and then we only meet him in the final film. Finally. And so this one, we hear all these references to Snoke, we hear like all the stuff about him, but we don't actually get to know him. We get to know him a little bit better in the next movie, but not even. Yes.
But like we literally see Snoke and he's like 50 feet tall.
Or at least his hologram is 50 feet tall, because it seems like he's being holo projected into that room.
I mean, yeah, I guess, but like that seems unrealistic to be like, I'm going to project 50 feet tall, and yet you've met me before in real life and you know I'm not that tall. Like, then you really just drawn the wrong
in Empire,
kind of attention
though,
to yourself.
The very first appearance we have of the Emperor in Empire Strikes Back, he is being holo projected into a room with Darth Vader in a scene very, very similar to this. And his face appears to be like 20 feet tall in front of Darth Vader. So I feel like there's a lot of intentional kind of going back and forth between the two movies to comment on one another. It doesn't always work. I'm not saying it's working or it's good. I'm just saying I feel like that's kind of an intentional connection there.
Mm-hmm. Also, cauterizing the wound does change how a blade to the stomach will kill you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and I want to
killing Han was yeah.
But like the way I saw it is, it looks like the angle is the blade is going up, like inserts in his stomach, but then goes up through his vital organs.
Yeah.
So that's what I thought, but I'm not sure. It's not very clear.
Yeah. It's so in Fire, which I just finished reading. Well, I just finished reading Bitter Blue, but right before that, I just finished reading Fire. In Fire, it talks about that an arrow to the stomach is one of the most painful ways to die, because then your stomach insides spill out, and that's part of what like slowly kills you. And so if you're cauterizing the wound immediately, then you're not going to have the stomach guts spill out right into the rest of your body cavity. And so that's where I was thinking. I was like, is it like, does cauterizing it actually make it less painful of it?
Maybe.
I mean, and then he's just dead, right? Like, we know he's dead, and it's not gonna last long, even if he's still alive when he falls. But yeah.
But also Han's death scene, no, it was so sad.
I know. Like, oh my gosh, that was a jump scare the first time I saw it.
Oh,
not
really?
This time, but the first time I saw it, when he killed him.
I love the character of Han Solo. I know he's super problematic and stuff, intentionally so. Like, he's intentionally like this kind of scoundrelly guy with unclear allegiances and stuff, and kind of sexist and all that stuff. But like, for me, I have a lot of anxiety for movies like this when I go to see them in theaters, so I have to read the plot summary to see who dies first, so I can actually enjoy the movie. Because if I don't, then I will be so concerned throughout the whole movie, like, which of my favorite beloved characters are going to die. So I have to like prepare myself. So like, I had to prepare myself I figured Han Solo was probably going to die. Harrison Ford has said many times that like he doesn't like these legacy reoccurring characters and stuff, and so he kind of likes if the character can just die and stuff like that. So I kind of had that sense going into it that he's probably going to die. It would make sense. But at the same time, like, I just needed to prepare myself, and I'm glad I did, so I could watch the movie and enjoy the movie, still feel very sad, but not like spend the entire movie anxious as fuck, just waiting for someone to die.
Yeah, that's real, and I will get more into that in our next Star Wars episode, because I had major feelings the entire time I watched that the first time.
Yeah.
Because of timing.
Also, I love, like, when Han Solo dies, we get to see Leia's clear Force ability. She senses it. It shows her, like, immediately, just like her heart breaking. She knows what's happening. And there are a lot of the scare quote fans, is just what I'll call them. The scare quote fans were like, it doesn't make sense that Leia would be all that strong in the Force and blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on. She's just as much a Skywalker as Luke. And while she doesn't want to follow the path to be a Jedi, she follows her own path into like politics and being a military general and all that cool stuff that she does, kick-ass stuff she does. She still very much is a Force user and has those abilities.
Yeah. That was just so gut-wrenching.
Right.
My final thing for the roll through is, what actually made R2 wake up? Like, what was the prompt? Because it wasn't, I thought it was clear, and then I was like, wait, no. I don't know why.
It's not clear at all in the movie. This is one of the scenes that is criticized a lot. It's very Deus Ex Machina, which, if you're not familiar with that literary term, listeners, it just means like, it literally means God out of the machine, and it's the way it refers to a plot device of when basically just something magically happens at the end that saves the day, that there is no like lead up to. It just kind of comes out of the blue. And so R2D2 waking up just kind of comes out of the blue. There doesn't seem to be anything in the movie that shows that. And so this is one of the two things in the movie that the movie doesn't show, that I feel like are a little bit of not necessarily a plot hole, but just like gaps of like, what is going on there. The other is how Poe survived. So the book answers both of those questions. So the R2D2 question is when BB-8 rolls over earlier in the film and sees R2D2, and C-3PO tells us that R2D2 is basically shut down, like his senses are down, like he just is powered down in like a power saving mode. R2D2 can still hear what's happening around him. He just is very low sensory mode, but he hears that the map to Skywalker was found by BB-8, and that's what starts him waking up, because he knows he has the rest of the map. So it takes the rest of the film for him to fully reboot his systems, and then at the end he's able to come in and be like, here's the rest of the map. So that's what the book answers for that. How
highly suspicious that it would take that long for R2-D2 to wake up, but okay.
After being in sleep for like 5 or 6 years, I mean, my computer that's 5 or 6 years old takes like several days to reboot.
It does not take several days.
But yeah.
Like a couple hours maybe, but
yeah. R2-D2 is also what, like 60 years old at this point too. He's kind of outdated machine.
Details. Do not speak ill of my R2-D2.
Saying something is old doesn't mean that I'm speaking ill. There's nothing wrong with being old.
Out of date.
Oh, yes, that's fair. And then the Poe thing.
An evil look.
Yeah, the evil glare. I feel it. The how Poe survived the flight is when the ship crashed, he flew out of the cockpit and flew many yards, and so he was not in sight distance of where the ship was. And so there's a whole scene in the book where he wakes up, realizes he's alone, he goes back to the ship, sees it's destroyed, can't find Finn, and so he just basically walks back into town and tries to get a ship back, so he rents the ship so he can get back to the Resistance. So that's what happens with Poe, because in the movie it's just very surprising. Like, we think he's dead, and it's like, nope, he's there. He's the lead pilot. It's like, where'd you come from?
I woke up and everything was gone.
Right. So
yeah,
and I think it also helps vindicate Finn a little bit, because the book does a very good job of saying Finn is looking everywhere for Poe and can't find him, so he just assumes that Poe died. Whereas in the movie, he's like, oh, I see his jacket, but he's not here. Guess he's dead. Oh well, and just kind of walks away. It's like, So, okay, our deep theological discussion of the day. We can start off with horror, I guess, because I feel like this movie, once again, has some very strong horror themes. And to the point that the movie the novelization even talks about the First Order, as that the First Order uses intimidation and fear as its politics. So that its specific political strategy is to intimidate and use fear, which is very horrifying. So... And Snoke is designed to look scary. Kylo's Ren mask is designed to look a little similar to evoke Darth Vader while being its own thing and also scary. And then the twisted metal of Darth Vader's recovered mask after it was burned on the pile is also kind of horrifying and scary. So.
Also, I think the dynamic of Kylo Ren and Darth Vader is interesting and reminiscent of a lot of the horror tropes of, I mean, it's the requel, right? But thinking about Candyman being redone and how we're evoking, while not completely remaking the original, but re-invoking those originals and that original fear and terror. And also white supremacy is horrifying, so and Christian nationalism.
Very much so. Yep.
I did think it was really interesting, the old ally who we hear of once and never hear of again and know nothing about. Convenient.
Yep.
But his
Laura Santeca you're referring to.
Yeah. Laura Santeca in the beginning. Which is really interesting to me, his comment of everyone has reason to atone, and so he hints at he has some great backstory. Nobody knows anything about it, but I do think there's this aspect of and we get that with Rogue One and Andor too, of there are things that we do for the sake of a good cause that are not good. And later on, Finn does basically the opposite. But it's just like, yeah, so that was interesting. And then the conversation that he has with Kylo Ren, where he's like, you cannot deny the truth that is your family, and he's thinking, Leia and Han, and Kylo Ren is like, you are right, and kills him, and Kylo Ren is thinking grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yep. And I also I actually kind of like this. Emily and I were talking about this a little bit when we watch the movies together, usually if we can, and so we try to, and we typically are like live commenting and reacting as we watch. So I like when in world building, when you reference these mysterious backstories but you don't actually go into them, because then it just makes the world feel more lush and alive and mysterious. Whereas I think your point is also fair, of like, if you have a character that is that clear to have such a backstory that's tied in with other characters, it would be helpful to at least give a little bit of more of an introduction or context to him. So I see both sides, but I tend to, me being the mystic I am, tend to be more on the mystery side. So
yeah. And like, I think what you're saying, right, like the mysterious backstories and those sorts of things, I do like the space where there is unknown and where we don't know how people come in and out. But when you're doing a sequel trilogy and you're talking about an old ally, the implication is that the person was somehow appearing in the original trilogy. Like, there is this implication of presence, because we haven't said there was this other big war and big thing that happened in the intertestamental period. We're going from the original trilogy to the next one, saying there's time has passed, but not that there's been this huge other upheaval and all of this other stuff.
yeah.
So that's where I'm like, it's something that makes it make a little bit more sense. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but like tie it in a little bit more coherently.
Yeah. Fair. But this also kind of gets into the legacy was passed down. So like Kylo feeling that his legacy is connected more to Anakin or to Darth Vader specifically than the rest of his family. Even though the rest of his family and Luke himself, like his whole point was there is good in Darth Vader. And when we see Kylo Ren talking to Darth Vader's mask, he's like, help me purge the good out of me so I can be more like you. And it's like, you're not understanding who Darth Vader actually was. You're misunderstanding who he was. But then we also get that with like Luke Skywalker and the way that he's now become a legend. And so like, did he actually exist? Is he bigger than life? And everyone's waiting for this legend to return to save them instead of actually like, and that's kind of what this next film will talk about, is like, we need to stop waiting on the legends and actually take ownership over in the struggle ourselves, which I like.
Which is a lot of what we're talking about for Nerds at Church in our superhero season, is deconstructing the idea of who counts as a hero and what does that imply about their dispensability and our lack of responsibility.
Yeah. And I love and this is also to your point too about Han Solo. Is he a smuggler or is he a rebel general hero? And it's like, he's both. And it's just, I love that kind of ways in which who we are changes in every context and among every person we encounter. Every person has a different understanding of who we are. So what makes us is much more fluid and dynamic than the way I think we typically think of ourselves, as having this like stable identity, and rather like our identity shifts in so many myriad ways in all of our encounters and relationships and stuff.
And in like, so two things paired with that is what are we worth, right? And this, like, it comes out most explicitly in the very beginning with like, what is a life or a droid worth? And apparently 60 portions is not enough for BB-8 for when it comes to like Rey's willingness to part with BB-8, which I love. I love that she's like clearly getting scammed and getting like priced out, and like given far less compensation than she deserves for the work that she's doing, and then she looks at 60 portions, and like her immediate reaction is like, let's go, and then she's like, wait, this droid needs to do a thing. No, you can't like. And so I think that that's like a really cool dynamic that connects with our identity and our worth and who we are, not just to ourselves but to those around us, and ultimately to the entire rebellion and resistance. But then the other piece of it is that names matter and that they can be given. And in a Christian sense, like there are a lot of people who have, like my mom has a saint's name. She was, because she grew up in the Catholic Church, and so Saint Elizabeth, and that became my middle name. And there are ways in which we are given names, and ideally as gifts, right? And then also the ways that we choose our own names as like other things. And so I love the dynamic between Poe and Finn, or FN 2187 as he is then like known, where Poe's like, what's your name? And he's like, I don't have a name, FN 2187. And I know some trans people for whom this has happened, where like they know that they want to change their name, or they want a different name or a new name, but they don't really know it, and then randomly someone gives them the name, not necessarily by like calling them the name, but like mentions the name or something like that, and it's like, oh, that is the name. And so Poe's like, FN, huh? Well, I'm gonna call you Finn. And Finn's like, great. And that becomes his name, his identity that he carries with him. And so I just love that dynamic with Poe and Finn and their relationship. And I set you up for a transition to your
part. Which gets to just how queer this movie is too. But there's also one other thing about names that I don't want to forget too, is intentionally Rey and Finn are not given last names. Finn because he doesn't have one, but Rey, we don't know what her last name is in this movie, and that was an intentional choice that they later go back on when fans scare quote fans complain about it and make Rey actually a Palpatine. Like, but like the initial thought was like, the legacy, like we have Ben Solo, that's his, he's trying to live up to the legacy of his grandfather and his mind of that. But then we also have Rey, who has and Finn, who are coming from nowhere that they know of, or Rey has memories of her parents and stuff, but like no family she can call her own at this moment, and they dumped her on this planet. And so I love the initial trajectory of the movies of saying that like where you come from doesn't matter as much as who you try to be and who you name yourself, who you try to become. And very processy there too.
I love that too, and that's part of like why I despise the 9th episode 9, because there is such a powerful witness to Rey not knowing where she's from, and then finding out that she's not from anybody special. And yet, she is Force sensitive. She is a Force user. She has this power. And it reminds me of the like problematic stuff that Harry Potter has a lot of problematic stuff. But like when J.K. Rowling came out and was like, yeah, if they're Muggle born, it's actually because somewhere way, 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 way back, they had a magical ancestor. And it's like, that is not helpful, and it's not good, and it doesn't serve anybody to make that up. It is much better when there doesn't have to be that tracing, because then like how did that person, like how did the squib become a squib, how does that even work? It doesn't make sense, and it just reinforces the you are born into this and you have to be special by like genetics in order to do the thing, instead of like it is what it is, and the gift and the joy and the possibilities are what they are for anybody, no matter their background, no matter their family of origin.
Agreed, hard agree. And now to the queerness, though, is
Speaking
this
of
all has been
queerness.
queer, though. Yeah, speaking of queerness, because we've been talking about it all along. But I love how this movie shows a queer platonic friendship between Rey and Finn that continues to develop over the next two movies, where Rey and Finn are very close, even to the point of holding hands. I know Finn complains about it at first, but later on they do it all the time without
No,
complaining.
Rey complains about it at first.
Oh yeah, Rey complains about it first. Right, thank you. But I just love how their relationship develops, and it's not romantic, and it's so rare to have a woman especially be the protagonist of a film without her having a love interest. This is a trajectory that changes in the third movie because of shitty reasons, but at least in the first two movies, Rey doesn't have a love interest. She is in this kind of close friendship relationship with Finn. And then but then we also get that sexual tension between Finn and Poe, especially in the scene when they reunite after Finn thought that Poe was dead, and Poe sees Finn wearing the jacket, and Finn's like, "Oh, I should give you back the jacket," and Poe says, "No, it looks good on you," and he makes the most bedroom eye face in the world. And so fans have went on and on and on about this, like especially queer fans saying there's some queer tension here. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And so Oscar Isaac, the actor who played Poe, has spoken about it and was like, "Oh, I know what I was thinking there. That was intentional." Like that specific face. I just love that. Of course, that's something else that gets changed when they give Poe a girlfriend or an ex-girlfriend in the third movie. That doesn't mean he can't be bi or something, but it seems very clear. But it seems very clear that they're trying to compet him to deal with the complaints about that character in the third movie.
Yeah, which sucks because there is like that look is just such an intimate look, and the other piece of this is the like triad, right? To think about Rey, Finn, and Poe, which doesn't come out in this movie, but comes out more in the next movie, I think. But that triad of Rey, Finn, and Poe, and the ways that they bond and relate to each other and connect in very queer and very loving ways.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I also just love we'll keep talking about this, but like all along the Star Wars films have been very much franchise that show a lot of queer chosen families of people who are not biologically related or legally related,
know that they're biologically related,
right? But like who still come together and form very close friendships and bonds and love and all that stuff. And so it just kind of continues that. And even with like Rey, kind of that hug between Rey and Leia is just such a close, beautiful hug. And like and at that point we don't know they're related. We find out that through Palpatine's manipulation of midichlorians that he's kind of Anakin's dad, and he's also kind of Rey's grandfather. But anyway.
Yeah, well, and that moment with Leia is just this like, and especially because it is everybody around them is celebrating because they've achieved this military victory, and there's this joy and this purpose, and then you see like that on the left side of the screen, and then right in the middle is just Leia and Rey hugging, and that embrace of like shared grief, even when they also like have all the other feelings about like, we defeated this thing, we like kept it from destroying stuff, blah blah blah, that shared grief and that moment and space that Leia does such a good job. Like Leia in many ways, even the limited amount that we see her, is doing what the elders should be doing, is creating and holding the space for Rey to do what she needs to do, but also to be the support that Rey needs, especially because Rey's parents are MIA. But to have that shared grief of the one who, like, Han was ready to take her on and have her join the crew, and like, yeah.
And it's just such a stark contrast to the original trilogy, where the only grief we encounter is Luke's grief. Leia still finds out that her family friend Ben Kenobi dies. We don't see her grief. Her whole planet gets destroyed.
Planet.
We don't see her grief. She finds out Darth Vader is her father. We don't see her grief. We all get it through Luke's eyes. And so it's so refreshing in this movie to have a moment of just two women, two people who are not men, sharing a moment of grief and remorse and all of those mixed feelings that you're talking about. And for the camera to linger there instead of just move on to the next thing. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And it's a refreshing, like, I mean, I think that's one of the refreshing pieces. I think another refreshing piece is the way toxic masculinity is portrayed is more accurate because there's more violence. But also that, like, those in the originals, right, like, Han had a lot of that. And it was just profoundly annoying, to say the least. But to see him having shifted, to see him having this deeper relationship, having this care for a son and for this other kid who he doesn't really know, but like randomly showed up in his own spaceship in the Millennium Falcon. And that space of like, okay, clearly we are now much more explicitly and clearly placing toxic masculinity and the like epitome of toxic masculinity, which is Kylo Ren, as on the side of evil. And to the extent that, like, he basically, as much as Darth Vader kind of was a missing stair, Kylo Ren is a super missing stair, right? Like, everybody just, he throws temper tantrums and, like, destroys things with his lightsabers.
Right.
And people literally, like, you see the troopers hearing him and they just turn around and walk away and, like, avoid. And there's so much problematic with having missing stairs and how we, like, work around them, but then to have, like, this very clear example of, like,
Also, since we are horror nerds at church, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the religion here, especially since the Knights of Ren seem to be kind of like a Knights of Columbus kind of deal. And like the First Order as a whole is a religious order that is also a political thing that is also tied to the Empire. But like in the Empire, the Emperor suppressed the notion of the Force. He and Darth Vader were Force users, but he wanted to say that the Force didn't exist. And this First Order is built on the concept of the dark side. So at their core, they believe in the Force, have this religious adherence to the Force. Even if only their leaders can use the Force, they still acknowledge the Force existence. Which I think is fascinating. And so just this and how that ties into like Christian nationalism and stuff like that, of just the religious motives for doing this kind of thing, religious motives for things like white supremacy or speciesism, as we get in Star Wars, stuff like that. And then but also just then, like, I love Maz Katana and I love Lorsa and Tekka, who are both not Force users but still have this kind of religious mystical understanding of the Force as this kind of godlike, kind of panentheistic quality of the universe that they kind of revere and almost even worship. And trust and let guide them, even though they don't use the Force. And it's the same thing that we saw. I can't forget his name. I forget his name in Rogue One, but yeah.
I was just thinking that. I was like, that's like in Rogue One. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just love that and how religion continues to play such a central role in Star Wars. Yes, thank you. Cheer it.
Yeah. Agreed. Also, I think this is interesting. We kind of talked about it before of doing like the right thing, having the right cause, but like doing the wrong thing to get there, which Andor gets at and Rogue One. But then the like Finn in this, and this is part of Finn's arc and growth, right? Is that he is so invested in helping in wanting to save Rey that he's like, okay, how can I help the rebellion to get here so that I can, because the only way for him to save Rey is to get there, and the only way for him to get there is for the rebellion to get there. And so he like becomes involved and invested in the rebellion, in the resistance, just for the sake of Rey, but then that helps him get into the larger reasons for it, which I think is really cool. So, yeah. Yep. So, Force lore.
Yeah.
You got any Force lore?
The only thing I have is kind of related to something you have, so I'll just let you go first.
Okay. I think, and I've said this before, and I'm just increasingly, there's just more and more evidence for it. I think that droids are Force sensitive. Not all of them. I think there is like that dynamic of if you keep getting your brain wiped, that inhibits you from developing Force sensitivities. But like R2 knew that they needed Luke. And this is before you told me the like made up story about how, he heard them say they had the map, and so then he was like, okay. But also in the original series, in the original trilogy, he knows, like, he insists that he has to go, and he like is gonna ditch, right? And he ditches Luke, but he knows that this is the path that he needs to be on to get to Obi-Wan Kenobi. BB-8 knows that they need Rey, right? Like, BB-8 does not trust Finn for anything except insofar as Rey tells BB-8 to. And so, but BB-8 trusts Rey from the start, from that first time that she rescues them from the whoever it is that's going to take them apart for parts. So I just love that, the like force sensitivity of droids. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And apparently ships are part personal property and part public property.
Right.
Like, the amount that ships just get stolen or just get left to be stolen is ridiculous. Right.
It's wild.
Ridiculous. Yeah. And like, also, how did Han actually like lose track of the Millennium Falcon? That is suspect.
Right.
How much do you really love her if you're willing to lose her and then lose track of her?
Right.
And just not know her.
I mean, it is a very large galaxy though, so I get that. Like, but so one of the weird things about this, about one of my own pet peeves about Star Wars that kind of breaks my willing suspension of disbelief a little bit too, because it seems to violate the laws of the universe, is whenever people are like in Star Wars are like just able to easily find someone on a planet. It's like it's a whole fucking planet. How can you find the one person you're looking for? How can you find this one ship on this one planet, in this one system, in this whole entire galaxy? Like, you could even go to the planet, but how would you know to look on the whole planet to find your shit? So that's my thing there. But yeah,
that's fair. That's fair. And then my final piece is that like powerful Force users like Rey can resist mind control even without training, and we saw this also from Leia, that Leia could resist in the original trilogy too. Is it, and like neither of them had training,
right?
So is it a thing that they're just like that powerful with the Force?
And just
is it that
women are better Jedi than men?
To like, right? Yeah. So
and there's, and a lot of a lot of the criticism from the Scarecrow fans of this movie is that Rey is this Mary Sue character, as if Luke wasn't in the first one, who could just suddenly do this shit. But even so, like, as you said, Leia was able to resist Force mind control of fucking Vader, and Vader's much stronger than Kylo Ren. So clearly Rey can as well, especially if we find out she's the daughter of Palpatine and Force power is inherited, apparently. Because the Star Wars universe
doesn't actually make sense for a monastic order where you can't get married and reproduce.
Right.
Like, where's the rest of the Force coming from?
But it's happening all the freaking time, though, in the Star Wars universe.
I mean,
it's one of those it's one of those it's one of those rules. Though I love it. It's kind of like in this is going to be real specific to ELCA church nerds, but there is this former document in the Lutheran Church, in the ELCA, that was called the Visions and Expectations.
No. Vision and Expectations. Vision. Many expectations.
Yes, thank you. So Vision and Expectations, which among the many things it said that people before the 2009 Churchwide Assembly, and then they kind of half-assed trying to change it after that. But before it, like, queer people could not have sex with somebody of the same gender, assuming that there's only two binary genders, because the ELCA sucked on gender and still does. So, like, you couldn't be in a sexual relationship with a man if you're a man. You couldn't be in a sexual relationship with a woman if you're a woman. Just completely outlawed. And yet, what is the rule versus what is the practice is a very different thing. And so, just the amount of times that document is not followed. It's not just by like group, but like the amount of cis straight people who do not follow the vision and expectations, or would have extramarital affairs and all that kind of stuff. But it's always the queer people that are kind of singled out for that.
I did have a lot of classmates in seminary who like went to the courthouse and then had their wedding like years later. Just so they wouldn't get in trouble in seminary, even though you're not supposed to like have to follow it in seminary. It's a whole thing. But yeah, part of it is Vision and Expectations was literally created to keep queer people from being ordained pastors. Exactly. It was always about policing queer sex. They added a lot of other fluffy stuff that's actually not bad, but it was always about sex.
Yeah, and so then the only other thing I have here is that the Force Awakens title alludes to this notion of the Force as a balancing act, which we got in Clone Wars and stuff like that before too, with this balance between light side and dark side. False binary, we know, but within the lore of the Star Wars universe, that's something they keep going back to. And so the notion is that with Luke being supposedly the last Jedi and cutting himself off from the Force, so he no longer can access the Force by choice, and with Leia still being kind of a Force user, but not, she's not like a Jedi or a strict adherent to the light side. She has great Force ability, but it's not something that she uses regularly. There's this huge absence of light side energy because Kylo Ren and Snoke are very, very powerful on the dark side of the Force. And so the Force as a balancing act is able, gives extra power to compensate to Rey as a light side of the Force user. So that's kind of like what the weird balancing Force Awakens kind of, the title Force Awakens is kind of referring to this balancing act where Rey is so powerful in the Force because she is the sole light side user of the galaxy at the moment. So that's why she's able to so quickly, one of many reasons. A, she's fucking competent. She's a woman. She's capable of all the things. She's been able to defend herself her entire life and stuff. But also she just is so. It takes many other Jedi, like many, many years to get to the power level she has. One of the reasons she's able to do it so quickly in the lore of the film is just because she, the Force is trying to balance and give her extra power to accommodate that. And the fact that the Force chooses her says something about her, just kind of like the way we talk about Mary being a chosen one of God. It says something about Mary, that Mary was chosen to be the bearer of God, just as Rey being chosen to be the light side of the Force avatar or whatever says something about her as a character and as a person, and just as how incredible of a person she is. So I love Rey is what I'll say here.
Me
okay too. I guess we can rate the film then. So out of 10 kyber crystals. Oh, I have one more Force lore thing, but it's more of a aesthetic thing. So one of the things I love about this movie that the prequel trilogy did not do is in the original trilogy, they were limited by the technology of the time. So when they drew the lightsabers would flicker a lot more. They would kind of like it was just like a very flickery lightsaber, and it was almost shaped a little bit differently than the computer generated effects of the prequel trilogy. What I love about the sequel trilogy is they went back to the original design. So even though they have this great technological ability to do this, if you look at Luke's lightsaber, it flickers in and out, just like it did in the original trilogy. When Anakin was using that lightsaber in the prequel trilogy, because that's the lightsaber he had in that fight against Obi-Wan, it's not doing that. It's like it's just a solid beam of light the whole time. So I just love that. It's mostly an aesthetic thing, but I love how that's kind of a callback to the original. So now, out of 10 kyber crystals, 10 flickering kyber crystals in lightsabers.
Well, yours might be
would
flickering,
you rate this
but
movie?
I don't know. You go first.
Okay.
I need to think.
I would say I would rate this 7 out of 10 kyber crystals, because I still, as I said all along, it's still a very good film. I don't think it's the best of the best, because it just is essentially a remake of a requel of the original, but still very good, solid film. So love it. My favorite kill would be, there aren't many good kills in this. I would say it's Kylo Ren's pride when he loses to someone who is fighting with a lightsaber for her very first fucking time. I mean, granted, he's wounded and stuff, but still, like, he loses. So love it. What about you?
I love that. I love it. I think I was trying to decide, and I think I'm gonna go with 8. I really love this movie, and I love the way that it is a new hope as it could have been, right? I just edited a podcast episode from our first season for Nerds at Church to get it on YouTube, and part of what I talked about there is like the movie Let It Snow as Love Actually as it could have been.
Oh yeah, agreed.
And better and queerer and more diverse and stuff. And I think that that is true of this too. It is Star Wars as it could have been. It is a more diverse cast. I would say
cast. Even as it should have been. But yeah.
Exactly. Same with Let It Snow. And I think that, I think going any lower than 8 would do a disservice to the ways that it is an improvement. And it's a requel, and also it's better than the original. So even and if Leia were not in it, I think I would have a different opinion. But I think having Leia there in the ways that she is there, in the ways that her character shows up, is a huge part of that.
Love it. Yeah.
So, and then, the favorite kill. I do love your answer of Kylo Ren's pride being killed. I think if we are interpreting life in a broader sense, as we have been in this whole season with the droids being force sensitive and all of that stuff, I think my favorite kill is the speeder that Rey wants to get.
Yeah.
Then she's like, oh, it gets killed, and the garbage one will do, and it turns out to be the Millennium Falcon. I just love that moment.
Right.
Yeah. So,
did you have any jump scares?
I had 0 jump scares this time. When I first watched it, I know that I had a jump scare at Han's death, but not this time. This time, 0 jump scares.
Well, that brings us to our next movie then. Our next movie that will be coming to your ear holes next week will be Aliens versus Predator Requiem.
And then in 2 weeks, we will have Star Wars Episode VIII, The Last Jedi, with special guest Brooke McClain, who we had on for Ghostbusters, and we are excited to have her back.
Agreed. Love it. Well, that's it for our show. Our theme music was by Matt May. We release seasonally on Thursdays. Please comment, rate, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to exclusive movie commentary episodes, BooTube episodes, and more bonus content by going to patreon.com/horrornerdsthatchurch. It's only $5 to sign up, so much cheaper than all the scavenging that Ray needs to do to get a single piece of bread. Powder bread.
Blue powder bread.
Follow us on follow us on social media, Facebook and Insta at Horror Nerds at Church and Blue Sky, and Twitter for Follow us on social media, Facebook and Insta at Horror Nerds at Church and Blue Sky, and Twitter at HNACPOD for all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, the garbage will do.
Indeed it will.